Alright, the job today is swapping the rear axle in this truck. So, this axle is a 390 gear with the bud and nice new brakes. I do have new brake cans for this. This axle that's in here now is a 2-speed rear. 456 is the high gear, and I don't know, maybe 547. I don't know what the low gear is. Doesn't really matter. But it's too slow on the highway. Now, I already swapped the transmission in this thing from a junk Spicer that was literally falling out on the drive home to an Eaton Fuller FS6406A. And this thing shifts absolutely beautiful. But it's one gear too slow. So low gear is super low, and overdrive, or 6th gear, is not fast enough. So should be a pretty straightforward swap. I just got those big bolts up there, these 4 air lines, and the drive shaft, and also the 2-speed rear electric wires. I don't really care about that. I'll just be removing it. And I also have a new drive shaft, because this drive shaft, see, it's got this, it's hard to see in the video, but this is the 1710 U-joint up here, really big. And this joint and the joint back there are something like 1550. So a lot smaller. You can see I had already replaced this carrier bearing because the drive shaft broke at one point. That's kind of why I wanted to replace this. So now it's going to be a one-piece drive shaft all the way from the transmission to the new rear axle. No carrier bearing, one slip yoke, and all brand new parts. So this U-joint on the rear axle is also a 1710. And it's got the bolts on the outside. This is probably my favorite style of U-joint because it's the most secure. So I traveled to Western Pennsylvania for this thing. It was a 7-hour drive. It was very far away. But because it's the right gear and it has these same exact hubs, bud wheels, which are pretty unusual, so I had to go that far. So doing this in a slightly unconventional way with the excavator. So the plan here, see how they're set up, is to take the back of the truck, hook it in these D-rings, lift it up, of course after all the bolts are loose, then swing the back of the truck over onto this axle. So before I do that, I'm going to take 2 wheels from this axle, put them on this axle on the insides, so that I can roll the thing around, and so it's about the same height. So most people would just jack the truck up and roll the axles around, but I don't feel like doing that. This thing will be able to lift the back of this truck up. May have to be pretty close to it, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And then pretty much just pick it up, swing it over, set it down right on here. These surfaces are nice and flat. They have a little bit of a nub right here. I have to grind that down. Of course, I'll get it centered and all that, but there's enough room in there for those plates on the bottom and the plates on top that I think are either attached to the leaf spring or maybe just sandwiched in there. So I'm going to try to reuse these bolts. And this is a maybe, because these have been on here since 1980. In my experience, at least on pickup trucks, you usually can't reuse these, but
I have the 1-inch impact that'll fit in here. Hopefully that'll have enough power to take this off. If not, I'm just going to cut them with a torch or a grinder and replace them. I'd really not do that, but we'll see. So, first order of business, might as well see if I need to replace these or not. So, I'm going to try to get these off of here. Let's get to it.
Alright, so now it's time to do the drive shaft. So it's 75.5 inches from the yoke on the axle to the yoke on the transmission. So that's center to center. So I got it set up right here, right in the middle. This thing is in around about the middle of its travel. And there's 75.5 right there, right to the center. So now you can line this up at the end, right there, where it's getting welded. See, this is about where the spline starts to be exposed. So I want it a little bit further in normal ride height. It does go down a bit more than it goes up, so maybe about there. So now I mark this at 61. And cut with the chop saw. So it's perfectly square. No variation, because any variation in this cut will make it shake. This has some effect in straightening it, but it's really this edge right here that makes it straight. And then I'll use some 7018 to weld both ends, and then fill everything up with grease once it's installed. So it's going to take a lot of grease. I'm going to probably use a whole tube, because these are completely empty of grease. You see right through it. So fill that up, and I do have an extra one here because of the tubes, or no, because of the caps rather. So on the axle end, they're both like this, whereas the way these come, this one and also these two, it's half and half. So these use the straps, which nothing wrong with that. It's just that I don't have that on the axle end. So the installation of the drive shaft is actually going to be a pretty difficult thing, because now I need to assemble the U-joint inside the yoke while it's hanging in the air. That will not be fun. On the other end, on the transmission, it just goes into the yoke with the straps. So, just pull this in a little bit, extend it, and then hook it up. And that should be it. But that's going to be the very difficult part. Let's get to it. Alright, this truck is done. Now it has a new rear end, new drive shaft, new transmission. That was a couple years ago, not in the video, but now this thing is truly roadworthy. You can see the drive shaft from here. Came out really nice. I didn't bother painting it yet. I will paint it eventually, but yeah, for now it'll be fine. I greased everything before I went driving it, and this new rear axle is good. No leaks. That's just from filling it, that little streak there, but no big deal. Also, these self-adjusting brakes worked out really nice, and yes, I know I got this big gash in the tire there. Working on that. This thing's getting new tires eventually. So this thing now does 79 miles an hour on the highway. I did that on a downhill in the valley. So that's just a good demonstration on how fast this thing will go now, because it used to just top out at 67. And I'm not even convinced it was completely topped out at 79. I think it could have kept going. But for now, this truck is done. I already did a scrap run with this thing. So maybe it's time for tires. But this thing is otherwise ready to go. It's a really nice driving truck. Wish I had this a couple years ago. Would have been nice. Alright. Till next time.